The rhythm of the ICU beep was the only sound keeping time in the room where Isabella Gray awoke. Not to warmth, but to shadows in human form. Her vision, bleached by fluorescent lights, struggled to focus. Pain laced through her body like wildfire under her skin. But it wasn't the agony that made her chest tighten. It was the figures looming over her bed. Two ghosts in designer suits. Her mother, Evelyn, wore worry like an accessory, convincing to the untrained eye. But to Isabella, it was a mask stretched thin. In manicured fingers, she clutched legal papers and a pen. "Sweetheart," she said softly, leaning in with syrup-laced sweetness. "Just sign here. It's all taken care of." Her fingers, cold and trembling, were forced open as the pen was pressed into her palm. Behind Evelyn stood Thomas Gray, her father, a man carved from stone and ambition. His eyes weren't filled with fear for his daughter's life, only calculation. The room felt colder when he stared. Isabella blinked. Her lips were cracked and breath hurt. But the words she spoke, raspy, defiant, cracked through the performance like thunder. "No." Just one syllable, but it changed the temperature of the room. They froze. And then, like snakes recoiling, they withdrew. No arguments, no threats, just silence and a rustle of fabric as they left her there, tangled in wires and pain. In the hallway, their voices returned, low, venomous. "She's ungrateful," Evelyn hissed. "We should have done this when she was still unconscious," Thomas replied, unaware the girl they thought broken was listening and awakening, because Isabella wasn't just alive. She was remembering, and she was planning, and that's when Lorraine arrived, not in a flurry of panic, but with the quiet strength of someone who had seen too much and endured more. Her presence filled the space with calm, but her eyes held storm. What happened after that would be the first fracture in the Gray's porcelain-perfect world, a world built on secrets, appearances, and lies. Because Isabella Gray wasn't some helpless heiress. She was the weapon they forgot they forged. She was born in privilege, yes, in halls where chandeliers outnumbered lullabies, where silence replaced affection, where cold marble met colder hearts. Thomas and Evelyn Gray were names spoken with reverence in boardrooms. The Gray Empire stretched across continents, luxury hotels, high-rise towers, silent stock portfolios. Their wealth could buy almost anything, except the soul they discarded the day Isabella was born. She wasn't part of the plan. From the moment she could walk, she noticed the empty seats at recitals, the hollow smiles in family photos, the way her name was said like an obligation. Her solace? One woman, Grandma Lorraine, a former history professor with fierce intelligence and deeper empathy. She didn't see Isabella as a liability. She saw her as a legacy. And that changed everything. By 14, Isabella was designing her own programs. By 18, she'd engineered a prototype app that used AI to monitor elderly patients in real time, a tool inspired by watching Lorraine's friends suffer under broken medical systems. But when she told her parents she wanted independence, they labeled her difficult. At 22, she walked away, launched Vivate Tech. No funding from the family, no press support, just grit, sleepless nights, and a team of fellow outliers. Within 5 years, it became a quiet revolution in medical AI, ethical, precise, and focused on saving lives. The world noticed, investors circled, governments knocked. Her parents? Silent. Until a business associate brought up Vivate Tech at a gala. Suddenly, their daughter wasn't a disappointment. She was a target. But Isabella had disappeared from their orbit. 3 years, not a call, not a visit, nothing. Then came the crash. Rain slicked the asphalt like glass. She never saw the black car coming. No honk, no warning, just a blur. And then everything spun. Her brakes didn't respond. Her vehicle flipped, the world turning inside out. The metal screamed louder than she could. When they pulled her from the wreck, she was barely breathing. Bones shattered, skull bruised, a rib sliced into her lung like a knife. And still, she survived. She woke up in that sterile room, broken, but alive, and her first memory, the sight of her mother's false smile, asking her to sign it all away. She said no, and that changed everything. The brightness clawed at her eyes like a blade. Her body felt like it had been crushed under a mountain, and something tugged relentlessly at her arm, an IV, sharp and unforgiving. As her vision sharpened through the fog, two shadows slowly formed near the edge of her bed. Not angels, not friends, her parents. Evelyn Gray's face stretched into a smile that looked like it had been glued in place. "Darling, you're awake," she cooed, her tone soaked in fake relief. Thomas Gray didn't bother with the performance. Ever the tactician, he stepped forward and dropped a folder onto her lap, like a contract from the devil. "Just precautionary paperwork," he said casually, "to protect your assets while you recover." But inside that folder was the truth, a full transfer of ownership, of Vivet Tech, her life's work, her fight, her creation. Isabella's voice was little more than a breath, but her mind was clear. "No." That one word sliced the air. They exchanged glances. Then came the rehearsed concern. "You're confused, honey," Evelyn said, her voice sharpening. "This is for the family. You don't want to lose everything, do you?" "No," she repeated, firmer this time. Evelyn's warmth drained in seconds. Her mask cracked. "You've always been difficult," she hissed. Thomas said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence had always been louder than words. Without touching her, without calling a nurse, they turned and left. The message was crystal clear: sign or be discarded. But they hadn't noticed the blinking red dot in the corner of the ceiling. The security feed had recorded everything, and someone had been watching. Someone who had never stopped loving her, Lorraine. The moment she received the call about the crash, Isabella's grandmother booked the earliest flight. She hadn't waited for permission. She demanded access. When she arrived at the hospital, the staff told her Isabella had already received visitors. That alone was enough to send alarms screaming in her head. And when she finally entered that room, saw her granddaughter, bruised, battered, but alive, her heart shattered. Then her eyes fell on the paperwork left behind. It took her 3 seconds to understand. It took her 2 to act. She called Mr. Dalton, Isabella's personal attorney, a man who had quietly held her power of attorney for years. Lorraine, always the quiet force behind Isabella's fire, went to war. Legal barricades rose like walls around Vivet Tech. And then they began digging into the accident, because accidents don't usually involve cut brake lines. 2 days later, Isabella opened her eyes again, this time to a familiar warmth. Lorraine's hand in hers. "You're safe now," her grandmother whispered. "They won't touch a thing that belongs to you." Tears slid silently down Isabella's cheeks. That was the moment she knew. This wasn't survival. It was war. What the Greys thought was a tragedy would become their undoing. Isabella began recovering, slowly, painfully, but with every healed bone, her resolve grew sharper. With Lorraine's help, she moved her shares into a locked, irrevocable trust. The new beneficiary? A nonprofit for underserved women in tech, something her parents could never exploit. She wired the hospital room with hidden cameras. She rehearsed her mask. And every time her parents returned, she met them with false smiles, drugged nods, and quiet lies. "I just want your advice," she murmured once, her voice soft and helpless. "I think I'm lost." They believed her, every word. Then came the invitation, dinner at the estate, one last conversation, one last family moment. Thomas and Evelyn arrived draped in luxury, ready to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Isabella met them in a wheelchair, her hair brushed back, her eyes kind. "I want to make peace," she said gently. "Let's talk." Hidden cameras captured it all, every twitch, every smirk, every lie. Then she asked calmly, "Tell me, who knew I'd be at that intersection?" Thomas faltered. Evelyn stepped in. "Darling, you know how fate works?" but their faces betrayed the truth. The very next morning, the internet exploded. An anonymous upload, edited hospital footage, audio of coercion, camera angles from that dinner. Headline: Billionaire parents attempt to steal daughter's tech startup after near-fatal crash. Social media turned into a courtroom. And then, the real courtroom followed. Isabella's legal team filed charges: coercion, emotional exploitation, suspicion of attempted homicide. Investigators uncovered a paper trail connecting the brake tampering to a shell company secretly owned by Thomas. The mechanic confessed under immunity, and the payment log sealed their fate. The media swarmed the case. Protesters camped outside the courthouse. Isabella arrived daily with Lorraine beside her, calm, determined. During cross-examination, Evelyn cracked. She admitted it. They were afraid that Isabella's independence would fracture the image they had built, that she'd become bigger than them. And she had. Verdict: Evelyn, guilty of conspiracy and fraud. Thomas, charged with attempted manslaughter, settled with a plea, forfeiting his fortune. The Grey dynasty imploded, and in its place, something better rose. Weeks later, Isabella stood at a podium with cameras flashing, reporters leaning forward. Her voice, once fragile, now rang with clarity. I'm donating 100% of Vivid Tech to a new nonprofit, the Lorraine Foundation, dedicated to women betrayed by family, silenced by power, and overlooked by justice. She gave it all away, not to lose power, but to make it untouchable. Back at the ruins of their estate, Evelyn and Thomas watched the press conference like ghosts watching the world they once ruled turn to dust. Their dreams, their control, their fortune, all gone. Isabella moved to a quiet farmhouse surrounded by orchards. With Lorraine by her side, she built a life worth living, mentoring girls, writing books, saving strays. They built a school, opened a library, planted hope. Vivet Tech became a billion-dollar unicorn, now a global leader in ethical AI. Every year, on the night of the crash, Isabella poured a glass of wine, stepped onto the balcony, and wrote just one word in her journal: no, because that word saved her life. That word burned down an empire of lies. That word started a revolution. The end.